I think I've just been here too long. But I went to the doctor the day before yesterday, and on Thursday, I guess it was. Said I was doing pretty good. He didn't want to see me for 4 months. I said, well, I'd rather wait about when I get about 93 or 4 and come back.
Yeah, really.
He said, let's just make it 1 year at a time. I made that clock rack up there to hold that.
Well, that's pretty.
Yeah. I just forget from time to time what I'm doing. Now, all of these, you know about Max Woody?
Yeah.
And all them, I got that walking stick from Max Woody, and how you like that car?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
He made that?
I fixed it so nobody really knows, see.
Isn't that great?
And, but, old Max Woody and D-Land, and all that bunch, I've been friends with them for 20, 30 years, 40 years, I guess.
Yeah, they're good folks.
Yeah. And B. Hensley, Ed Presnell. Ed Presnell was probably the most photographed craftsman in the world, I guess.
What did he do?
He was a wood carver,
Mm-hmm.
and Ed's dead. He wasn't big as your thumb. Had a long gray beard, came way down here. When he talked, you had to listen pretty good to hear him.
Yeah.
He just talked real slow and easy, you know. But smart old boy. Did some beautiful work. And he made, his specialty was making dulcimers.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed was a true artist. He really was.
Yeah.
He carved a great big wooden door in walnut and took it to Raleigh to sell. Of course, it didn't sell because he had to have so much for it, you know. He said,
Yeah.
I said, well, Ed, I'm sorry you didn't sell your door. Well, it doesn't matter to me. I'll just take it home and put it in my house. But he was a fine fella. Fine fella.
Well, tell me about the school that you were getting in trouble because you were running away from home. Tell me about the school down in Athens your mother sent you to.
Yeah, you mean when I was in grammar school?
Yes.
Well, I think my primary problem was that I didn't like school anyway. And I did love the woods and the river. See, Athens is built right on the side of Oconee River. Well, in fact, there's a forks of that thing, and it's a few miles one way and a mile the other way, and you're on 2 rivers, you know. Typical old muddy Piedmont area rivers. But Lord, it was so interesting out there on the river and in the woods, and if I just got a little bit restless around school, next day I just didn't show up. And I was looking at one of my report cards. Here the other day I was in the 7th grade, and I had more C's than anything else, but I'd passed everything. B's, few A's. I think I had hygiene. I got A on hygiene.
Yeah.
But math was a snap for me. I love math. And in 4 years of high school, I never took a book home, and I averaged 98 for the 4 years.
Golly.
And all the math they taught, I took every course they taught, and the driest part of the whole thing was business, arithmetic. I didn't know like that worth a darn. But anyway, in grammar school, I'd get disgusted. The next day I wouldn't show up. In fact, quite a lot of times Mama didn't know. In fact, she didn't know most of the time. I worried my poor mama to death, I know, but she finally realized, I guess, that I was going to be a little rambler. And but I'd get a quilt if it was cold weather. If it wasn't, I wouldn't worry with the quilt. I'd take my flip and get some matches, and I'd make lead slugs for my flip, about big as the end of your little finger.
Yeah.
And they were very effective on squirrels. I could handle a squirrel pretty good with that thing, with those lead slugs. But I'd go to the woods and I'd stay a week. Sometimes I'd stay 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'd swim in the river and I'd play in the woods and I'd hunt and I'd fish and I'd mess around. And I was in hog heaven.
Yeah.
Now, there ain't no doubt about it. I just was in heaven. And like I said now, I did that. Well, that report card I was telling you about, I think I was present about 60-something days and absent 30-something days. You know?
Yeah.
But that was just my life. I just loved the woods. And I got expelled from College Avenue School, from the normal school, from Chase Street School, and from Child Street School. That's 4 schools. I think that's the only grammar schools in Clark County, or it was at that time. And I got expelled from every one of them. And my mother, some way or the other, she met a fine old gentleman, a farmer, that lived out in Madison County, about 3 miles from Isla, Georgia. I don't know if you know where Isla's about as big as this house. And they had a cotton gin and this, that, and the other. And I think they had one filling station over there. But she met this fella, and she also found some people that knew him, and he was a wonderful sort of person. He was a good man. But Mama satisfied herself that it was a good family, you know. And then she boarded me down there. And I think I was still in the 1st or 2nd grade. I didn't make much progress the first few years I went to school for some reason. But anyhow, he had one daughter, and that's the only child they had. And she was, I believe she was just a little older than I was. I'm sure she was, just a few years older than I was. But anyhow, she boarded me down there, and it was just all farmland for 3 or 4 miles in either direction you'd go.
Yeah.
Just farms. That's all there was to it.
Yeah.
And they had a little settlement over there at Rogers. They called it Rogers. There's a blacksmith shop and a church and a little country store, and that's all there was to it. It was on a crossroad, dirt roads. And the old man, he loved to hunt and fish. And he's a gentle, easygoing kind of a fellow, you know. He had pretty good humor. I liked him very much.
Yeah.
In fact, he come close to being the only daddy I knew till I got married.
Yeah.
And I just felt like he was my daddy, really, after a period of time. But I stayed out there and went to school. Well, both the school teachers boarded at his house. The little 2-room schoolhouse, about half a mile, I guess, from his house. And they both boarded at his house. Well, that put a crimp in my rambling, because, you know, when they went to school, I had to go.
Yeah.
I mean, they saw to it that I went, period. I couldn't dodge them. There's no way I could get away from them. I did slip away one time, but I got caught pretty quick. But anyway, I had to go pretty regular out there, and I did all right. I think I went through 2nd grade, or might have been the 3rd grade, I don't know. But he and I got along real well.
What was his name?
Williams, Cohen Williams.
Cohen Williams.
Cohen
okay.
Williams. And they lived in the Rogers community, just about 3 miles from Isla, Georgia. And that's just hard scrabble country. That's all there is to it. But he owned about 100 acres, and I helped him on the farm. I did what I could. I wasn't big enough to do much. Mostly aggravate him, I reckon.
Yeah.
I know one time I came home in the summer, and the Barnum and Bailey Circus was coming to Athens, and we lived on Cobb Street, and the house faced King Avenue, just like I'm looking straight out like this, you know, straight in front of our house. We was on the opposite side of Cobb Street, and King Avenue went that way. And on down King Avenue, about a half a mile or a little farther, was a great big open field, and that's where they had the circus.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the wild idea. I wanted to sell some hot dogs and Coca-Colas. And so Mama pitched in and cooked me some hot dogs, and I bought a case of Coca-Colas. It cost me 80 cents a case. There's 2 dozen bottles in a case. And I got in my front yard, and I sold everything I had. And I made $9 and something. And I went to town and bought me a single barrel 410 gauge shotgun. An old Stevens, you know.
Yeah,
It's a good little old gun.
We've got a Stevens 410.
Oh, it's a good one. But anyway, and I had enough money to buy that gun and 2 boxes of shells. And so it wasn't long after I got that gun, I had to go back down to Mr. Williams to start school. And I stayed with him all winter. But anyway, the first thing I did when I got down there, out in the smokehouse, there was an old barrel set in the corner of the building, and you come in the door and go over there. You could shake that barrel, and the rats would run up the side of the wall and out, and they'd run across the beam.
Yeah.
A ceiling choice, you know, up there. So I was bad about hunting them rats. He had an old red-bone hound, and me and that dog tore up all the rats around the country there, you know. But I went out there, and I shook that barrel, and I had that old gun loaded, and that rat come up, and we got about right there, you know. And I blowed him off of that sill, knocked the chunk out of the sill about the size of your fist, blowed a hole in the roof with shingles, you know, like that. I didn't think nothing about that. I killed a rat. Boy,
Yeah.
I was so proud of that. Ah, man, I went around the front. He was sitting on the front porch. And I told him, I said, I killed that rat. I killed that rat. He said, let me see. So he come down there, you know, and he looked, and there's that hole in the roof. Yeah, I know what he thought. Later I realized, of course, at that time I was excited. That didn't mean nothing to me. He said, well, that's all right. He said, that was a good shot. He never did fuss at me about shooting that hole in the roof.
How old were you then? You were in...
I guess I was about, 8 years old, maybe 9, something like that. I was hunting with the old double-barrel L.C. Smith hammer shotgun when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love to hunt. Yes, sir. Yeah. But he was just that type of man. He didn't raise Cain with me about shooting the hole through the roof, you know. But I blowed them shingles every which way. I was right at him. But he mechanical drafting and experimental machine work and all this and that and the other. And finally took a job as supervisor, promoted to a supervisor, and I was overseeing about 11 operations, I think, and some 200 workers. But I got into upper echelon politics, and that sort of thing didn't suit me. I just walked out.
Yeah.
And I was making good money, but I just flat walked out. And
Well, what was political about it?
well, it jealousy on the job, envy of this, that, and the other. You know, all those little nitpicking things that
Yeah.
people that are typically human, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't cut out that way. I couldn't. I like to have fun. I like to enjoy myself. And so I just didn't want the aggravation. But anyway, I went in business for myself down there in 55. I quit them and started my rock and gym shop with $150. That's all the money we had.
Yeah.
And my personal collection, I had already built all my tools that I needed for cutting gems and sawing rocks and stuff, you know. And had already been practiced and able to do the job. Mama kept working, and she kept us fed. And
what'd she do?
She worked at Coates and Clark.
Oh, okay, all right.
She worked in the, I think it was color control or standards or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she took samples and did clerical work on that sort of stuff, reports. But anyway, they had certain standards they had to meet. And but she kept us fed. And in the meantime, back in 46 or 47, I went up, heard about years ago they used to mine rubies up in Cowee Valley. In fact, I was reading about it in some of the mineral publications. And I went up there and I talked to old Carol Weaver Gibson and Uncle Will Holbrooks into, they were just like me. They wasn't able to farm, and that's all that was up there was just farms.
Yeah.
And I told them, I said, well, why don't you just quit planting corn and let people come out here and dig these stones up and charge them $1 or $2 a day, and you just sit out here under the tree and hold your hand out, let them drop the money in. And they thought it was a pretty good idea, and they got started on it. And by golly, they made money.
Yeah.
And Macon County, Macon County, North Carolina at that time was just a place you had to get through to get to Cherokee.
Yeah.
And now, boy, it's just a hustling, bustling little city.
Yeah.
You know, it's great. But people out of Florida got started coming up there. They have a fly-in. A bunch of aviators had come up every year, and the publicity from that and a good many other things, why, it just caught on like wildfire. And I'm telling you, you just wouldn't believe how many people came in there and bought property and everything else. Stayed year round just to dig in the stones, you know.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed the scenery too, the climate, the scenery, and everything. But it was great. And I made a statement one time. Well, I just put Macon County on the map, you know. Well, it was just an idea. I didn't do any work. And but I was glad of the fact that it turned out that well and people benefited from it.
Yeah.
And in fact, I worked for the sheriff up there 12 years, free of charge, in the winter.
Yeah.
When my business was closed.
Yeah.
You know? But I always tried to help every community I was in. I wanted to do something for the community. And in fact, I'm past master of the Masonic Lodge over in Toccoa. I worked in that Masonic Lodge for years.
Yeah.
Just for trying to be a member of the community, you know.
Yeah.
And but I moved up there when in 59, 54, 58, 59, we moved the shop to Franklin. It was that business was it was on the road going good, you know, up there in Cowee Valley. So I moved the shop up there. And we stayed up there till 78, 20 years. So we stayed in Athens 21 years. We stayed in Toccoa 20 years. And we stayed up there 20 years, and I sold out and came down here. And we've been here 22 years, and we hadn't found a place to go yet for the next 20. That's what's kind of got us aggravated, you know. But we love this place. We've enjoyed it a bunch.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of good friends, and a lot of friends in North Carolina, though I haven't been as as active and faithful in running back and forth and seeing them and being in touch with them, but I remember all of them and I love them, every one.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your days in the Navy. I mean, how did that open up for you? And
well, when the war broke out, my first son was born January the 5th. Pearl Harbor was December the 7th in 41. He was born January the 5th in 42, which you might say a month later.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our first kid. And man, I'll tell you, there's just nothing like it. But anyway, I stayed home, and Mama got up and stirring good, and everything was going fine. And I decided, I told Mama, I said, Mama, I said, I cannot stay home with that war going on.
Yeah.
I just got to get in it. And I said, I feel like I've got as much or more to protect than anybody. I said, that boy and everything. But I didn't realize how it was going to be. It's just, in other words, I just had that drive, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, when he was 5 months old, I believe it was, I went and enlisted in the Navy. And I went to Norfolk for boot training, basic training they call it in the Army, I think. And I got a chance to come home, and he was 9 months old. And then I reported back to duty, and I was transferred to Navy Pier in Chicago, and they put me in a diesel school up there, which I didn't know anything about, diesel engines, you know. But they put me in a diesel school, and most of the new construction they were doing in those days, especially in the light ships, was all driven by diesel engines. And they needed diesel engineers bad. And I was in a class of 2,000. I graduated 58th, I think it was, in the class. And they transferred me to Miami to the sub-chase school down in Miami. And the PC-586 was commissioned in Algiers, New Orleans. That's where it was built. And it's, I think the PC boats were about 150, 60 feet long, something. They looked like little destroyers is what they looked like. And they had two 1,800 horse diesels, V16 diesels in them, the same engines they use on the railroad. Of course, they used others beside that, but it was a GM-built engine, and pretty powerful. But the PC-586 come to Miami, and they needed more crew. So I had just gotten down there, hadn't been there very long, and they said, they looked at our records and they said, well, you've got all we can teach you. We don't need to put you in school here and hold you up. Said, you want to volunteer for this ship? I said, sure, why not? I mean, that's what I came for. Mm-hmm. And so I went aboard the PC-586. We convoyed a troop ship over to the British Islands, Bermuda. I forgot. Nassau. Yeah, we convoyed a troop ship to Nassau, and we got in a hurricane, and we got there about 24 hours after the troop ship did. It beat us all to pieces. That little outfit, you know, and
yeah,
it wouldn't ride the seas like the bigger ships would. We had a boy in the crow's nest 40 foot above the water, and he said he could have done his laundry while he was there, the way the thing was rolling. I stayed at my duty station 72 hours, couldn't get out. came back to Key West, and then on through Panama, and up the west coast. We put in San Salvador. We had an engine that blew a cylinder line, and we had to put it in San Salvador to repair it. And then we went up, I think we put in Manzanilla, Mexico to get some fuel. Went up to San Diego, and then convoyed from there out to Pearl Harbor. And from then on, we operated out of Pearl Harbor, convoying and hunting submarines, and you name it. That was the primary job for that vessel was submarine warfare. But we did a lot of convoy work, just protecting the larger ships from submarines, you know. And we went on down at Midway. We went to Wake, Palmyra, Christmas Island, all around taking these troop ships or supply ships, you know, convoying for them. We got in a fight with a submarine one night at Midway and dropped, between us and our sister ship, I think we dropped 80-something depth charges and never did get that thing. They got a radar contact on it up in the wee hours of the morning. I guess it was a periscope, but they got a contact, and it was halfway between us and our sister ship. We were cruising parallel course, and here's this thing cruising right in between us.
Pretty smart, Pretty smart, wasn't it?
Yeah, but we dropped so many depth charges, the water was, silt in the water was so turbulent that the sonar system just wasn't worth a darn. Mm-hmm. All that disturbance throws the sonar off, and there's no way. You got to wait for that to settle, and that takes time, and the sub has time to do what it wants to do, you know. At that time, that's the way it was. It's different now. The equipment is so much better in advance. But I stayed down there, and I caught this darn jungle rot, we called it. Both of my feet swelled up about like two 10-pound hams. I couldn't wear shoes. I spent a month at Aia Heights Naval Hospital out of Honolulu. They didn't know how to doctor this stuff, but anyway, they got it down where I could at least get my shoes on, and then they transferred me back to Vallejo, California, commissioned that salvage barge. Actually, the proper name for it was Yard Derrick, but anyway, I commissioned it and took it to Seattle, Washington. I had to put in Seattle, and then do some. We had one hatch leaking water into one of the compartments. I had to get that straightened out and refuel and all this and the other. And then we went from there to Sitka, Alaska. I stayed at Sitka 3 months working. I took shore batteries off of the beach there. They originally started to build a sub base at Sitka, and but when we run the Japs off of Attu, they didn't try to follow up the invasion of the Aleutians. They were going to come on up the chain and get into Alaska proper, you know, mainland. But it didn't. We run them off of Attu, and the action down in the South Pacific was such that they couldn't maintain an offensive up in the North Pacific.
Yeah.
So they gave up on that, and the Navy decided they didn't need to try to build a substation up at Sitka. So I was taking shore guns off of the beach. I think the barrels and actions were somewhere around 12 tons, and the bases were somewhere around 14 tons or a little better. I'd go and take those things off of the beach and haul them back to Sitka, the transport ships, the cargo ships, and I'd let them down on the cargo ships. You know, pick the thing up, put it right down over on deck or in the hold if they needed it. We had a 20-foot tide at Sitka, and you had to work according to the tide. On account of having a sufficient amount of water and this, that, and the other. But that went on for a while. We got all that out of the way. And one time I was transferring depth charges in a cargo net. Of course, they didn't have any detonators in them. And I think they were 300-pound ash cans, we called them. Just a metal drum full of TNT is what it was.
Yeah.
And in one end they had a place to put a pistol in it, and that was the detonator. We called it a pistol. And I had 6 of them in a cargo net, a rope woven cargo net, and that thing was kind of old, I guess, and frayed or whatnot, but I was going to pick them up off of the dock and put them over on the cargo ship to lower it down in the hold. And I got it over the cargo ship and started down with those things. And that dang net tore, and every one of those things rolled out of that net and fell about one deck. Boy, you talking about a bunch of people walking on tiptoes. Whew, that scared us all. Those things were rumbling down in that hole of that ship, you know. Bloop, 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 bloop. I guarantee you, buddy, there was some tight hide walking around that thing. Everybody drawing up. But didn't have any problem. They had all the detonators were out, which I guess was a darn good thing. So, but that's I hauled obsolete ammunition one time off of that too. There's several tons of it. The hand grenades, black blasting powder, aviation bombs, depth charges, you name it. Any kind of explosive. 5-inch cannon shells, 3-inch 50s, and all that stuff. But it was obsolete, so what to do? They ordered me to take it out to the dumping area, and they had a certain area in the ocean, about, I guess 3 miles or more or 4 from the island. And they load, I don't know, 10, 12 tons on deck. And I'd haul it out there and dump it. They griped at me the first trip. The ensign in charge of the working party, he wanted me to lay to. And I said, no way. I said, this thing will make 8 knots. And I said, 8 knots is what it's going to be making. As long as they're dumping that stuff, because I don't want one of those depth charges. If somebody left a detonator in there, if it goes off under this thing, us laying there dead in the water, I said, it'd blow us out of the water. Mm-hmm. I said, they can roll it off. I said, my boys will roll it off if your crew won't. So I kept it going. They rolled it off. We didn't have any explosions or detonations, which I was kind of worried about, you know. Some of that obsolete ammunition is kind of tricky. And it's like old dynamite. You don't know what it's going to do or how sensitive it's going to be. That nitroglycerin starts bleeding out. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't lay to. I told him, I said, dump it, throw it over the side. I said, I'm going to make every knot this thing will go. Well, it worked out all right. We didn't have any problems with it. But that ensign put me on a report about that. And I went up to see the captain. Captain asked me about it, and I told him what happened and why I did what I did. He said, well, that's all, Danny. That's what they call me, Danny.
Yeah.
He said, that's all. Go back to the ship. And I went back, and I was walking down the hall. I heard him chewing on that ensign, boy. Very idea. Laying to, trying to dump all that stuff. As sensitive as some of it could have been.
Yeah.
But he straightened that ensign out. I think that ensign was just what we called a 90-day wonder and just had got in the Navy. He looked like a kid to me anyway. But he chewed him out. Now, the next day when they brought obsolete ammunition down for me to haul out, he wasn't with the crew.
Yeah.
I kind of got a kick out of it. All my boys just laughed. They had a big joke out of that. I had my cook. See, we lived aboard that barge, and I had a cook from Colorado.
Yeah.
His name was Wilson, and he lived at Grand Junction, Colorado, when he enlisted in the Navy. And I'd go out and catch fish, and when I was diving, every once in a while, I'd catch a codfish or something, anything.
Yeah.
Or I'd go out and look for scallops along the rocks and whatnot, and bring them in for him to cook. And boy, he just hollered and whined and went on about that. He wasn't used to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But after he got kind of settled into it, and the crew enjoyed some fresh fish, and all, it went over pretty good then.
Yeah.
Mama sent me some gingerbread. These packages of gingerbread mix, and I tried to bake a pan full of it, and that thing didn't rise. It was just about a quarter of an inch thick, and just like a piece of leather. In fact, I beat that pan on the table just trying to get it out of there. That gingerbread was my Jonah, but I got old Wilson to work on it. He cooked us a bunch of gingerbread. We enjoyed that. That wasn't for me, though. I prized and scraped and everything else, and then when I got it out of the pan, you couldn't eat it. But it was a big treat anyway. I'd catch a lot of Japanese perch up there along the docks. It wasn't a large fish. It fish, maybe a foot long,
Yeah.
and built kind of like a bass, but didn't have quite as big a mouth and all.
Yeah.
And they were turquoise blue. And when you cleaned them, the flesh was turquoise blue.
Wow.
Beautiful color. But it make you wonder whether you ought to eat them or not, And put them in the refrigerator, and they'd be just shiny blue. And old Wilson, boy, we had a terrible argument about that. He didn't want to cook them at all. He didn't want nothing to do with those fish. So I told him, I said, you cook me some of those fish. I said, I'll eat them. And I said, then if it's all right, well, we'll all have fish. He did, and it turned out they were pretty good. I enjoyed them.
Wow.
But it was the oddest thing to see those things. When you clean them, that flesh was just as turquoise blue, just as pretty as it could be. But it was so odd that you're a little bit gun shy of the things, But I had to get into anything like that I could.
Yeah. Keep it interesting, huh?
Yeah. Well, anyway, the war ended when I was on that too, and the base commander told me, he says, I'll give you a commission if you'll stay here 3 more months and help us shut down and secure the base, Naval Air Station and the base. I said, and boy, I'd been overseas so long, I just couldn't. I wanted to, but I just couldn't do it. I just told him, I said, well, I saw my son, firstborn son, at 9 months old when I got out of boot camp. The next time I saw him, he was 2 years old. And then when I got home, he was 4 years old. And he was the perkiest, prettiest little old boy you ever laid your eyes on. Smart as he could be. and Mama had made him a little Navy uniform, and everything. Yeah. And in Athens, she went to live with her parents in Athens while I was overseas. And they had a Navy school down there, Navy supply school. And of course, he saw those boys out marching all the time, training and whatnot. while I was gone. When I got back, boy, that's all he wanted to do. He wanted me to march. We had a time walking up and down the street, marching. And he'd, hup, hup, hup. I'd like that little old duster. But other than him, I had all my boys swimming before they could get out of diapers. I had one boy, the one that's living up the road up here, would go off of a 10-foot board and swim. And he was still wearing diapers. Yeah. I'd go down underwater, and watch for him to come off, and he'd come off. And he had them little old feet and hands just to go in, and I'd just be sure he's making it back to the top.
Yeah.
And come up and go along with it. But he was a little water duck sure enough. Oh boy, I enjoyed that. But all of them could swim as infants. That's one thing I wanted them to do. I had seen so many people get in trouble down at the swimming pool there in Athens when I was a lifeguard. And I wanted all my boys to swim. I don't believe you can save a person's life. I had any number of people say, how many people did you save while you was lifeguarding? Well, I relieved 13 people from their distress in the water. But I don't think I saved anybody's life. I just don't think an individual, unless he can act as an instrument of the Lord and relieve people from a distressful situation. But I don't believe if the Lord says that's the time for that person, there ain't nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah.
It just is just not the way it's going to be. But I did take a great amount of satisfaction in being able to help a few people. I only had one problem in that particular line. An ex-neighbor of mine called me one day. I was real early in the morning. I was still in bed. Wanted me to come to his house. His wife was in the bathtub, and they thought she'd drowned in the bathtub. She'd slumped down, was underwater. And we went out there running as fast as we could get there, and 4 or 5 doctors come in just a little while after. But we got her out of the tub and got her stretched out and covered up, and hot water bottles and everything we could think of, And I was working for artificial respiration, which is different from the way they proceed now. And the doctors gave us several shots of adrenaline, and I think that's what they give them, trying to get his heart started beating again. And but it didn't work. She was dead. I think I never did find the pulse. I never did get it. She never did try to gasp for air or anything.
Yeah.
I think she just had a heart attack and died right there in the tub. But my old neighbor there, he was, oh Lord, I don't want to see that anymore.
No.
Things happen, Sometimes it doesn't affect you one bit in the world. And other times it really gets to you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. It just, I don't know, circumstances or whatnot. Well, that's about all the war stories I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you about some of the things, because I ain't never told Mama, and I don't want her to know.
Well, that's fine with me.
There's some things you can't talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say we got our rudders and screws all messed up down at Midway. They had to tow us back from Midway back to Pearl Harbor and go in dry dock.
Yeah.
It bent the propeller shafts and everything. And we was about 10 days on the tow from Midway going back to Pearl, and we gave out a chow, and we was eating crackers and water. That's all we had to eat. Well, I'll tell you one thing. It took me a long time to learn to eat crackers again after that. Hey, me. But that was a monotonous trip.
Yeah, I bet.
Everything dragging and eating crackers and water, Sorry trip.
When did you first become interested in woodwork?
Well, it was just like the scrimshaw. When I was doing gem and jewelry, I did scrimshaw for diversion. It was a hobby. And then when I sold the gem business, I did scrimshaw at all the craft shows. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And then I think I quit craft shows. I used to go to Raleigh every year. I went to Raleigh 20-something years, I think. And went to Rockingham along North Carolina, that craft show down there. And I went to the Anderson Fair down here. They started a craft building, and I went down there. We were charter members of all this except Raleigh. We weren't charter members down there because that thing had started 2, 3, 4 years before we started going. But I just got tired of going to craft shows. Years were building up, and another thing, my eyes weren't as good for doing scrimshaw, and I just decided I'd start doing woodwork. I wanted to do something, and I started doing woodwork before I stopped going to craft shows. Like I say, that was my diversion, just something I took an interest in and wanted to play with.
Yeah.
And so I got doing woodwork, and I'd do whatever I took a notion to do. And I got to making these tables, and old Max Woody would sell everything I could make. And but I bought all my equipment. That whole building is full of stuff up there. I bought it all just making tables. Of course, I used to take those tables to craft shows too.
Yeah.
But Max took everything I could make, summer and winter, you know. And I used that money to buy my woodworking equipment. It kept me busy. I've been about 2 years since I quit making this stuff. Doctors don't want me in that dust anymore.
Yeah.
Boys started shuffling stuff around here up there in the building about 2, 3 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and working on motorcycles and this, that, and the other. And they got my stuff disarranged from the way it used to be. But I want them to do the shop, you know. I want them to get in there and get to work.
Yeah.
Learn something about it. And they sure got a good chance because all the equipment's right there.
Yeah.
But all they're doing right now is playing with motorcycles.
Those your sons or grandsons?
Huh?
Are those your sons or your grandsons?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
They like motorcycles?
The boy, my son that lives up here, has got one boy. That's my only grandson.
Oh, okay.
And that's my second son, the one that lives up here. My first son is in New Orleans. He's a liaison between the Navy and Douglas Aircraft people. He's the one. He's a aviation electronics engineer.
Yeah.
And he, when the Navy wants some aircraft updated electronically or whatever along that line, he goes and checks it out and estimates how much it's going to cost, makes a bid on it.
Yeah.
For Lockheed, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got his picture. Now let me go get his picture. He put in 23 years in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
My brother put in 20 years in the Navy. And they all come out with with good conduct ribbons, but I didn't. I had bypass surgery at the VA hospital out of Asheville out there at 18.
Yeah.
And then I held out pretty good for about 10, 12 years, and I had another one and went back to Emory over here in Atlanta, and they did angioplastic work on me there, and I did real well for about a year and a half, and I had another one. I went back to Emory, and they put in stents. That's been about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've been holding up pretty good since
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
In fact, the doctor told me the other day, said, your heart sounds good. Great. I said,
Yeah, that's good news, isn't it?
Put a good flutter valve in that thing and a choke so I can choke it and crank it if it starts.
Give you a pull chain, huh?
Yeah. I got to have some kind of means of getting at it.
Oh, dude. The weather's not very good. Yeah. This is Russell Bowman interviewing Bob Daniel on March the 7th, the year 2000, about wood at Andrew Jackson's Hermitage.
Hello?
Bob,
Hey.
how you doing? This is Russell.
Hey.
How you do? You all right?
Yeah, pretty good. Just kind of poking around. Mama stove oven went out on her, so I'm a stove mechanic today.
Uh-oh. You fixing it all right?
Oh yeah, it really be no problem. Just a nuisance, that's all.
Yeah. All right. Well, about the wood you got at the Hermitage. Where were you on the way back from?
Memphis. We went. Mom and I went over to Memphis to visit that oldest boy. He was that was in his early years being in the Navy, and they put him in a electronics school, Navy electronics school over in Memphis.
Yeah.
And we went over to visit him. It was sometime about the mid-60s, I guess. And coming on back, we decided we'd like to go see the Hermitage. We'd never been over there, so we went over to look that over, and I noticed a pile of old lumber laying out there that was pretty well rotted. And I told Mom, I said, I said, when that was first put over there in the weather, I said it would have been good for something.
No joke, yeah.
And but anyway, we went through the building, the home, Andrew Jackson's home, and they wouldn't. We couldn't go into the kitchen area. They had some bad seals under the kitchen floor, floor joist, and they had to tear the flooring out. And that flooring was about an inch and an eighth thick, yellow poplar, and it was tongue and groove, which you don't see that type of material nowadays anyway. But anyhow, they